We have a jam-packed agenda for you and hopefully lots of great conversation that can be had today. So thank you for joining us. I'm Terri, President and CEO here at the Chandler Chamber. Public policy is obviously very important to the businesses here at the Chamber. And these events would not be made possible if it wasn't for our sponsors. And I do want to do a shout out to our sponsors. Air Products and Chemicals, Salt River Project, Planet Startup, Chandler Dignity Regional Health Center, Intel, Catalyst Computer Technologies, Southwest Gas, Edward Jones, Terri McKibbin, APS, and Dragon Walk Fine Chinese Restaurant. So thank you for that. And you know what, let's give them a round of applause. And we also have one of our sponsors here today that continues to help us continuing to move our policy efforts forward here at the Chamber. And that is SRP. And we have Alan here. Alan is a senior governmental affairs representative for SRP. Prior to his work at SRP, he served as a policy advisor for 8 years in the House of Representatives. And you still have hair. Sorry, I had to throw that in. He holds a degree in political science from the University of Arizona and a master's in public policy from the University of California, Berkeley. In his free time, Alan enjoys hiking and trail running throughout Arizona. What's your favorite place you've been, Alan?
Grand Canyon.
Grand Canyon, you gotta love that. Let's give Alan a round of applause. Grand Canyon. I know I just had our twin granddaughters out here as for leisure one night. They wanted to do Piestewa Peak at 6 o'clock at night. And I'm like, I just worked all day. You guys can go. So congrats. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Terri, and good morning, everyone. So thank you for the introduction. It's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker here, Arizona State Senator Sean Bowie. Senator Bowie is serving his third term representing Legislative District 18, which includes Ahwatukee, South Tempe, West Chandler, and Southwest Mesa. Sean serves on the Senate Appropriations, Senate Finance, and Senate Commerce committees. In addition to those committees, he's intently focused on restoring education investments in our K-12 schools and higher education institutions. Sean and his family first moved to Legislative District 18 in 1994. A product of the Kyrene Elementary and Tempe High School districts. Sean graduated from Mountain High School in 2002. Senator Bowie then went on to ASU, receiving degrees in political science and history. Also, Senator Bowie received his master's degree in public policy and management from Carnegie Mellon University in 2013. Just want to finally share, in addition to his work at the state Senate, Sean also works as a professor of practice at ASU's School of Public Affairs, where he teaches courses on leadership, ethics, and research methods. Senator Bowie lives by the motto of his alma mater, Carnegie Mellon University. Art is in the work. So thank you and good morning, everyone, and thank you to Senator Bowie. Welcome.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How are we doing today?
Fantastic.
I am happy to report it's June 10th, and yes, we still are in legislative session. We have not adjourned yet. Usually we adjourn early to mid-May, usually around 100 days. I think we're on day 151 or so right now. We kind of have to pass a budget by June 30th. Our fiscal year starts July 1st. I'm going to get to the budget later. I'm sure you've got questions about the budget and want the inside gossip. Nobody's recording this, right? It's being recorded, so I will watch my words carefully. Before I start, I just want to give a couple shout outs. One of my colleague, Representative Jennifer Pollock, is here. I want to give her a shout out. She had her first bill pass the Senate earlier this week. Declare what is it, Asian American Heritage Month. Her first bill. It's kind of a tradition in the legislature. Whenever someone's first bill comes up and it has wide support, a lot of people vote no initially just to scare them. It happened to me. It happens to everybody. And I got up on the Senate floor and just congratulated her and spotlighted her for hard work. And I happened to mention that it was her first bill. making a joke about it, and then a bunch of red votes went up on the board. Thankfully, they all went to green and it passed unanimously. So I just want to give her a shout out for that. I also have two good friends of mine here who are running for the House in District 12, AJ Cardolo and Stacey Travers. That time of the year where all those annoying campaign signs go up. It's a little weird not to see my sign up there because I'm not running for re-election, but two great candidates in District 12 if you live in District 12. So legislative session, we've been done with committee hearings for a while. We finished committee hearings at the end of March. So a lot of people ask, well, what are you doing April, May, and June? It's a lot of floor action, floor debates, conference committees, trying to wrap up, issues, get amendments on bills. So a lot of the heavy work's already been done. Bills have been sent to the governor. So there was a few bills I was going to highlight. I was also going to talk about voting rights and water, and then I'll get to all the juicy budget gossip, which I know why you're all here. And the chamber, I know, is coming up after this. They might spotlight some of these bills that were important to the business community. These are all bills that I supported and have been signed by the governor. There were a couple bills relating to property taxes that passed this year that I know are really important to the chamber. One of them is House Bill 2822, which was sponsored by Representative Wenninger here in Chandler, and the other was Senate Bill 1093, sponsored by Senator Mesnard here in Chandler. Both are relating to equalization, property tax reductions, kind of clearing that up for businesses. I've been hearing from businesses for many, many years that was a priority. Both of those bills passed with bipartisan support. I supported both of those bills. So I know Terri and her crew are going to highlight those two bills in a little bit, but those are two things I wanted you all to know about. The other is a bill that is getting its way through the process. It hasn't passed yet. It passed the Senate, but it's in the House right now, and it's Senate Bill 1643. And it has to do with R&D, research and development tax credits. We've done a lot of work over the years to provide tax credits for qualified facilities, for research and development, for the Intels of the world. I know Intel's here. Honeywell, Raytheon, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor. We passed a similar bill last year, and then the day after the governor signed it, Intel announced their $20 billion expansion here in Chandler. So this is something that a lot of states do to recruit jobs, recruit employers. So this is another bill that would basically lift the cap. This program has been so successful that it runs out of money very quickly. So we're looking to expand this a little bit, and there are guardrails in place. So companies would have to create jobs and they have to commit to staying here for a long time in order to get those credits. I supported that bill in the Senate. It's over in the House right now. It would cost about $50 million one time for the general fund. My hope is it'll be in the budget this year. The next bill is Senate Bill 1239. How many of you have driven between Phoenix and Tucson on the I-10 lately? It's horrible. Right? It's horrible. It's important for me because what we're talking about connects my district down to Casa Grande. So we passed the bill this year. The governor actually signed it. It's in the budget right now. It will provide $400 million to widen the I-10 between Chandler and Casa Grande. So very excited about that. Long overdue. I know the Chandler Chamber has been very supportive of that. It's in the budget. I don't think it's coming out of the budget. It's an example of infrastructure investment one time. We have a lot of surplus dollars that are one time. So for me, investing in infrastructure that's going to grow the economy and create jobs, that's a good investment. So hopefully construction will start on that within the next year, and then it'll take a couple of years before that's completed. So good news on that front. Another bill, which I know is important to a lot of folks in the hospitality industry, even the restaurant industry, is Senate Bill 1001. It's an easy one to remember. It's the first one. It has to do with, the short title is extortion social media messages. So we were hearing from a lot of businesses, from hotels, that people would come to their properties and basically say, upgrade my room, give me a suite, or I'm going to go on online and write a bad review for you, TripAdvisor or whatever it may be. Or it could happen to restaurants, could happen to businesses as well. So we wanted to toughen the penalties for that, for anyone who attempted to do that. So that's a bill that we passed. I believe the governor has signed it. I believe it would be theft by extortion would be the charge. So we passed that bill a couple weeks ago. I believe the governor has signed it. So that's something that I know is important to the business community as well. So that's my bill list, and a couple broad issues just to touch on real quick. If there's one issue that I think has dominated this session in terms of our time, in terms of media coverage, it's been the fight on voting and voting rights. You know, in Arizona, as many of you know, we've had systems in place for a long time relating to early voting, relating to voting by mail, drop boxes, things that were broadly popular and not controversial until a year ago or 2 years ago. So we've had to deal with a lot of bills going after various voting rights that people have enjoyed for quite some time. So we've been able to defeat dozens of bad bills in the Senate, often by one vote. That would really make dramatic, and I would argue unnecessary changes to our voting laws. We've had some election integrity bills that I've supported, had to do with recount margins and minor changes that I thought were fine, that I thought were necessary. But when we talk about, you know, getting rid of drop boxes completely, when we talk about not allowing the counties to count early ballots before election day, when we talk about getting rid of early voting entirely, that's completely different, and I would argue completely unnecessary. About 85% of Arizona voters vote by mail. So we can talk about making elections more secure. I'm always open to that conversation, but not taking away rights that Arizonans have enjoyed. And I will remind you, this had always been bipartisan. In the mid-90s, I wasn't even old enough to vote yet. It was a Republican governor and a Republican legislature that introduced bills to introduce the early voting system that allowed emergency voting if you were going to be out of town or you couldn't get to the polls on election day, that introduced drop boxes. These were all bipartisan ideas. Even a year ago, after the 2020 election, we passed the law unanimously that gave the counties more time, from 14 days to 21 days, to count early ballots before election day. So that's why on election day at 8 p.m., you generally know who's going to win, because those are all the early ballots that came in before election day. Then we had a bill this year to go in the complete opposite direction and not allow counties to count those ballots at all. So what's changed? So there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of rhetoric out there. I'm happy to report that we've stopped 99% of those bills. I don't know what's going to happen next year when I'm not there anymore, but at least for this year, we've been able to hold the line and stop a lot of those bills. So anyone who votes early enjoys the benefits that are associated with that. Know that that system is going to be in place at least to this election. Who knows after this election? Another issue I'll talk about real quick before we get to the budget is water. Obviously, water is a very important issue. There's a lot of concerns about the drought. There's a lot of concerns about Lake Mead. The media likes to write a lot of stories about it. The governor has made this a priority. We are looking at spending about $1 billion of state funding on water this year. The governor wants to create basically a whole new state agency to take this $1 billion of taxpayer money and use it for projects. Where there's been talk about desalinization plant in Mexico. There's been talk about acquiring water rights. So we're having a lot of conversations about how to do that. There's some bipartisan concern about it. You have some who don't want to create a new agency because it's more government. Those of us on the Democratic side are a little concerned about some of the oversight and not enough oversight on the governor and who his team would be. So I'm hopeful we'll come to an agreement on that. I think we need to do a lot more on conservation and make that more of a priority. And we also don't have a lot of regulation around groundwater in the rural parts of the state. You might have read an article in AZ Central about Saudi Arabian firms coming to Arizona and making a deal with the state. The Senate had no control of that, by the way. Making a deal with the state to basically just acquire land and pump as much water as they want. So if we're asking Arizona taxpayers to conserve and be more judicious with water use, but we're allowing not just out of state, but out of country companies to come in and use as much water as they want, you know, that's really not fair. So I'm hoping that we can come to an agreement on water before our session ends. So last but not least, the budget. What's going on with the budget? I was at a chamber luncheon yesterday and I must have had at least a dozen people come up to me and say, what's going on with the budget? Are we close to a budget yet? The answer is no, we're not close to a budget yet. I mentioned we have this, pesky deadline of June 30th. The fiscal year starts July 1. Our state budget is about $14 billion a year. About half of that is K-12. It's also our state universities, it's our correction system, it's access, our Medicaid system. It's a lot of things that we fund at the state level. Generally, the rule with budgets, this is my 6th year, so my 6th budget. Generally, the rule with budgets is the more money we have, the longer it takes. Because a lot of folks are fighting over what to do with those dollars. Some folks want to cut taxes even more. Other folks want to invest in ongoing things like teacher pay raises. Other folks want to use it one time, things like infrastructure, paying down debt, better funding our pension systems, all these things we can use the money for. The other dynamic here is, as most of you probably know, we have a very narrowly divided legislature. So the Senate is 16-14 and the House is 31-29. And you need 16 and 31, you hear those numbers a lot, you need 16 and 31 to pass any bill or a budget. So that would mean if it's going to be a really partisan budget, you would need every member of the majority on board. And they don't have every member of the majority on board. Every member of the majority knows that they can play hardball. If they don't get what they want, then they can hold everything out. And that happens quite a bit. Of course, they could work with those of us in the minority, but that's always a harder ask for them. So I'm someone who, I've been through 5 budgets. I voted for at least part of the budget 4 out of my 5 years, including the main budget twice. So I am the Democrat in the legislature that is the most willing to cross party lines and vote for budgets. My last year, I have my own priorities, like to see funded. I like to go on a high note and pass a bipartisan budget that's good for the state. That is very well known by everyone involved. So we've had some conversations. I wouldn't argue it's gotten to a substantive place yet, but I am fighting for a couple of things. Our surplus, again, our budget's about $14 billion. Our ongoing surplus is projected to be about $1.5 billion. Our one-time surplus, what is it now, over $3 billion? 3.7 billion. So we have over a $5 billion surplus. Now that 3.7 billion, we don't want to use that for ongoing things like teacher pay raises. That's one time, but that's a lot of money. And again, if we spend $1 billion on water, I'm fine with that. We're going to be spending about $1 billion on paying down state debt and putting more funding into our pension systems for police officers, firefighters, state employees. I'm fine with that too. A couple of my priorities, K-12 education is always my #1 goal. We have put a lot of dollars into K-12 the last couple of years. I voted for several of those budgets, but we still have a lot of work to do. So one of my Republican colleagues and I in the Senate have been working on a proposal to put an additional $800 to $900 million ongoing into K-12. Not just into the base formula, but also funding things like career and technical education for workforce development, things like special education. We have bipartisan support for that plan. We also need to do more to invest in our universities. Arizona has cut, we're at an ASU building right now. ASU has cut more from higher education than any state in the country since 2008. K-12 has gotten a lot of the attention, higher education has not. Our community colleges here in Maricopa County, we don't fund the state level at all. So it's very easy to cut taxes and cut regulations, but we need to do more than that. If we want to grow our workforce, bring employers here, we need to make those investments. The third plank would be housing. A lot of housing policy is at the city level, but there are things we can do at the state level to work with developers and public-private partnerships to fund more affordable housing projects. We have something called the State Housing Trust Fund, which we used to fund at the state level, like a lot of other things. We can make investments in that fund to incentivize developers to add more affordable units, because Chandler is like a lot of other cities. Affordable housing is becoming more and more of an issue. I'd like to buy a house one day, for example, like a lot of other millennials. So I think that needs to be the third plank. I also have a tax cut bill that I would love to have included. It's Senate Bill 1018, I believe it is. I would create a state earned income tax credit, which would be a tax credit targeted to low-income working families. They have to be working. 31 states have this. Oklahoma just expanded theirs last year. Virginia just passed one in their budget. It was such a good idea. The governor stole it from me and put it in his budget proposal back in January. So I'm very hopeful that we can get that in the budget this year. So we have time, we can take some questions. Long story short, we don't have a budget yet. I'm very hard at work to get us there, but we might be there late into the night, June 30th, early July 1st. We might cover all the clocks in the Capitol, so it's not really July 1st yet, so we can pass the budget. So happy to take any questions that you guys have.
Open up for questions. Senator, I just want to thank you for some of your support. You know, you talked about that restaurant bill or the social media.
Yeah.
I know that we worked with the Arizona Restaurant Association, Steve Trickery, we had him out here as well as Representative Weniger. This is a real issue that was happening here in many of our Chandler businesses. They were going into restaurants saying, if you don't give their little club a 10% discount when coming in, every time they come in, they were posting Yelp reviews and that. It was really, I don't look at any of those reviews, seriously, because you don't know how they're, and it's real life happening. So I appreciate and applaud you on that. Getting back to the budget, there are a number of things that, can you point out 2 or 3 that we're so far apart on? Because what we're hearing, I don't know how you're gonna make that June 30th deadline. I know that what we're hearing is that there will be movement next week. But it will probably go right down to that June 30th for a vote. So what are the 2 issues? I know that there's more than that you're really far apart on.
So the initial draft of the budget that the majority's been working on leaked earlier this week. There are some good things in there. I'll just point that at the outset, but there's not enough investment in K-12, and the dollars that they have in there aren't really new dollars. They would do a property tax cut here at the local level and then just replace that with general fund dollars. So it looks like another $300 million, but it's not new investment at all. So we need to do a lot more in K-12. There's also over $500 million for a border security fund, of which $355 million is for a border wall. So there are smaller projects in that fund that are for personnel, for technology. You know, that's one thing. I'm open to that conversation, but over $350 million for a border wall, that's starter. The Supreme Court's also very clear that immigration is a federal issue. So using state dollars for that, when we could be using state dollars for things like education and healthcare and infrastructure and so on, that's going to need to change too. So those are probably 2 of the bigger sticking points right now.
What was the House bill for the R&D tax credit?
The Senate bill, I think it's 1643.
Quick question. You mentioned the Arizona budget is $14 billion and half of that goes to K through 12. So that would be 50%. So what percentage of our budget do you think should be going to K through 12? Because 50% to me seems like a pretty good number.
Well, you know, part of the reason for that is our state has grown a lot over the years, and you know, we're adding about 1 million people every 10 years. So more people move here, so the budget's going to go up. When you look at per capita, per student funding, when you compare us to other states, you know, we have made additional investments. A lot of those investments are inflation adjusted, which are required in the Constitution. So when you compare us to other states and investments that other states have made, we're still lacking pretty considerably. New Mexico this year, for example, just gave their teachers a 10% raise. We're either 47th or 48th in per student funding for K-12. We have the worst student to counselor ratio in the country. We have the worst teacher turnover rate in the country. So again, if you were to increase that by $500 million from what it is now, it's not really that much above 50%. So we're going to have to do this over time. You know, I voted for the governor's budget back in 2018 and 2020, which did the 20% pay raise over 3 years. That was a good start. We need to keep going. We're losing teachers, and you know, teachers are not paid as well here as they are in other states. They can go across the border and make an extra $20,000 to $30,000 a year. So we want to keep good teachers in our schools. We want to reduce class sizes. Again, we have the worst student to counselor ratio in the country. There's a lot of things we can do. We can make incremental investments and keep more teachers in the classroom and make our school stronger. I mean, the district I represent, I have some of the best, I'm not just saying this because it's my district, but I have some of the best public school districts in the state. My family moved to Chandler because of the Kyron School District. When I talk to my constituents at the doors, the number one thing they say when I ask what issues are important to you, 9 times out of 10, it's education. So it's protecting and supporting those schools and keeping them strong when I have kids one day and for future generations, and that requires investment. And I want to do as much as we can, given our parameters in the budget this year.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the school counselors? We know that mental health is a huge issue across all facets of government. I know that I think the ratio is like 1 to 550
It's over 800 more.
or 800 to 1. Yeah, I think that is high. In those proposed, are there any additional funding for counselors, school counselors?
It's a good question. Glad you asked that. So back in 2019, one of my former Senate colleagues and I, we were able to get in the budget an initial $20 million appropriation for a school safety grant, where schools could apply for either a counselor, social worker, or an SRO for their schools. There's a 3-year grant. So a lot of schools here in Chandler and in Kyron have used that. I mean, school districts can fund them themselves, and this is meant to supplement that. So looking at the budget this year, there is an extra $50 million ongoing for that grant program, but it's only for SROs. Nothing for counselors, nothing for social workers. So if schools want to bring in SROs, I have no problem with that, but that fund needs to be not just SROs, but also counselors and social workers as well. We've passed bills in the legislature to increase that pipeline for more counselors and social workers. But again, that's something where we need the investment and we need to expand that grant program so schools can bring in more counselors and social workers and school psychologists. Just because I can tell you, visiting schools, I go out and visit all my schools every 2 years. I sit down and talk to school counselors, especially at the elementary school level. It's really, really important, and we need to prioritize that going forward.
You mentioned about 3.7 on the surplus, one-time surplus monies. Out of that, how much is that ARPA monies?
It's all state funding.
It's
ARPA
all
money is
state.
separate.
Okay,
There's over $1 billion. of
I just
ARPA
wanted
funding.
clarification on that.
The governor has sole discretion on the ARPA dollars. So there are some things we'd like to do on housing, for example. We have a bill that would put $100 million of ARPA funding into the housing trust fund, which would be great. But at the end of the day, the governor has sole discretion over that. And there's also restrictions on what you can use that money for as well.
Correct. Additional.
Just a comment. I just wanted to applaud you for your support on education. I've been hearing about Superintendent Hoffman talking about, the large number of teachers leaving the classroom and how they may need to go to an emergency method to, certify like high school graduates, just scary. And just like being a, mother of 3 young children in Kyron, like I had teachers, I think there was like 10 teachers that left my individual school, and that's in a good school district. So that's scary. So thank you for all that you're doing on that.
Another question.
Mine kind of tapers off hers, and I'm glad we're giving incentives to schools to get those counselors and that kind of thing. Are there any way to get incentives, and I don't know if that's even a possible thing, but we need to make those counselors before they're available to be into the system. Is there any way to give the education, trade schools and stuff I know have during this pandemic have given people incentives to come be electricians and everything else. Is there any way to do that in the education system and help get these high school graduates, rather than just handing them a certificate, get them educated and want to encourage them to pursue these fields that are so much needed at that point, so that we start early on and then develop that.
That's a good question. We've been working with the universities and community colleges to expand their educational offerings. So once they do come out of high school, if they do want to be a counselor or work in the mental health field, they have more slots essentially for those students. Another part of the issue is, if you're going to ASU or NAU or wherever, and you're getting a degree in counseling, you can make a lot more in the private sector usually, because there's also demand in the private sector as well. So again, that's another reason why we have to pay competitive wages at our schools. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder to get those folks actually in the schools themselves. So that's another reason why, increasing the per student funding for K-12 and the base is really important, because it gives school districts additional flexibility so they can make those investments. And again, it's by district. So I'm generally a pretty strong local control person. So each school district, they set their own budgets, they hire their superintendents. So depending on which district you're in, a district like Mesa Public Schools, for example, has a counselor in every school. Irene, unfortunately, does not. That was a decision that was made by their governing board and their superintendent. So giving them more flexibility, but if we are able to increase the investment, I'm pretty confident that mental health is going to be a priority, because it's something our kids really need. I think our schools recognize that as well. They're just constrained because of their budgetary constraints.
I'm very lucky enough to have been awarded on Carving School as the counselor that my daughter actually has been assigned to. So it is to me and my family. So I can understand there's a lot of families that are not assigned to us.
Great. We have one question there, and I think there was a question.
And this, not really a question, it's more of a comment. I mean, here in Chandler, we just had 2 suicides recently in the high schools. And there was a gathering not far from here, and you had a lot of the students who were expressing their frustration and their fear that they had no safe space to go to. One little girl stood up and said, I'm in high school, I've been depressed since I was in 6th grade. And I have no support. I have no one to talk to. And it's heartbreaking. So I'm glad that you were able to find the support that you needed, but it's been so frustrating listening to you talk, because I'm a mom too. I've got a 4 and an 8-year-old, and I'm worried about their future and the support that they're gonna get. And it just, I guess that was my only comment.
I think there was one other, the last question, because we've got lots on the agenda yet, so.
So I know you had mentioned, obviously wanting to put more money into the K through 12. You mentioned special needs. Where does that fit into all of this? Because obviously special needs is clearly on the rise with evaluations and diagnoses and things of that nature.
It's been a priority for us. So the $800 to $900 million that I mentioned earlier, 100 million of that is just for special education. And that's actually in the budget right now. It's one of the good things that's in there. It's $100 million ongoing for special education. And talking to superintendents about this, they like that because those dollars have some flexibility, and it would make a really big impact. So I think there's bipartisan support for that. I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get that in there. We're obviously working on the other facets of it, but pretty confident we'll be able to get specific support for special education in the budget this year.
Thank you, Senator Bowie, and for your continued support, especially your support and on the business community. So we really appreciate it. So I want to introduce our 2 public policy interns, and I know that I'm going to bring them up here. At the Chandler Chamber, we have always had a rich array of interns, and I believe in helping to train that next workforce. In fact, our public policy interns have probably been some of our most successful interns. We've got them from the governor's office, congressional seats. We've got, the head lobbyist at the Corporation Commission is a former intern of ours. So when you take a look at some of the things that we're doing, policy is really important to business. So I'm going to have them come up. They're going to introduce each other, and because I also think it's part of that growing process. And then everybody knows Ashley, who is our public policy and government affairs her intern. She actually came to us when she was working on her master's. And when she was finished, she went to DES to help write policy and so forth, and we were able to bring her back. So again, that whole internship program is really, really important as we continue to build our workforce. So I'm going to have Christina Bustamante come up and I'll introduce her.
Bio for Christina here. So next it's my pleasure to introduce Christina Bustamante, our public policy intern. Christina was born and raised in Chandler and is dedicated to helping her community. She earned both her bachelor's and master's degree in psychology from ASU while working full-time as a 911 dispatcher for the Chandler Police Department. Her love for her community and helping others inspired her to continue her education, and she is now pursuing her law degree at the University of New Mexico School of Law. Christina is thrilled to join Chandler's Chamber of Commerce as an intern and looks forward to supporting and advocating for members of the city that her family has been a part of for many generations. Please join me in welcoming Christina Bustamante. Thank you, guys. Good morning.
Good morning.
So first, we're going to talk a little bit about session history and makeup. So January 10th was when the 2022 legislative session began. We hit the 100th day on April 19th. And unless my math is wrong, I have one day different. We're at day 152 for today. Our session history, so we've had 1,780 bills posted. Of those, 277 have passed, 1 was vetoed, and 267 were signed. Our CNADA anticipated date is June 30th. I've heard it both ways, okay? I don't know, a lot in law school, I'm not saying we have credibility here, but the Chandler Chamber of Commerce has weighed in on 45 bills during this session. I've got this pretty little visual for you guys of the makeup of both the Senate and the House of Representatives. In the Senate, we've got 16 Republicans and 14 Democrats. And in the House, we've got 31 Republicans and 29 Democrats. Chandler is a part of 2 different legislative districts. It's going to be 17 and 18, and we talked a little bit about it before. District 17 is going to be east and south of South Chandler. That is going to be Senator J.D. Mesnar, Representative Pollack, and Representative Winiger. District 18 is going to be the west side of Chandler. I'm not saying I'm a favorite or anything, but I grew up in the west side.
This is a current makeup. It's now that the redistricting, and we'll bring that up when once the redistricting, but this is how it currently looks.
You guys are familiar with Senator Bowie, Representative Germain, and Representative Epstein. Next, we're going to be talking about some of the legislation supported by the Chandler Chamber. Senator Bowie went over House Bill 2822 a little bit, and I'm just going to go briefly over what that is. It is reforming basically personal property and how it's evaluated for purposes of taxes. Before, if you have seen the 76-page manual from the Arizona Department of Revenue on how to determine the value of your personal property, it is very painful. And there are valuation factors to be found. This bill is making it much simpler by just making that valuation factor 2.5%, which means the taxes should be lower on that personal property being things like your equipment for your business, laptops, vehicles, things like that. We've heard a lot of people talk about the issue and the tax burden for being taxed twice. Essentially, you're taxed when you purchase property, and then as a business, when you have that personal property, you are taxed on it again every year. So this will help relieve some of that, those burdensome taxes from businesses. And that was sponsored by Representative Winiger. So next, I'm going to be bringing up my colleague, Sebastian Alman. He's another one of our public policy interns. He is a second-generation Mexican-American and is currently in his sophomore year at ASU. Go Devils. He's a dual major in public service and public policy, as well as economics, with hopes of attending graduate school for a master's in public policy. His areas of interest in policy include education policy and mental and health services. Please join me in welcoming Sebastian.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys and to talk about some bills that are pretty big for our business community here in Chandler. The first bill I want to talk about is House Bill 2271, or the Community Impact Special Plates Bill. This bill was signed by the governor on April 13th with the help of the bill's sponsor, Jeff Winiger. The bill aims to help State 48 create and sell a especially designed plate through the Arizona Department of Transportation, with the proceeds from the sale of the special place being donated to the State 48 Foundation. The State 48 Foundation is State 48's nonprofit organization that aims to help entrepreneurs and other nonprofit organizations within the state. The next one I'll talk about is Senate Bill 1239, or the I-10 widening that was just signed on May 4th by Governor Ducey. It appropriates $400 million to the Arizona Department of Transportation for the expansion of I-10 between Chandler and Costa Grande. The bill will help alleviate a lot of congestion between two of Arizona's fastest growing cities, and it'll help facilitate a lot of commerce and workforce traveling over the next few years. It also gives Arizona the opportunity to apply for the $5 billion federal infrastructure bill. They are allocating parts of it to cities that want to help build and maintain their infrastructure in rapidly growing economies. The importance of this is that nearly $1.4 trillion $1.4 trillion annually worth of commerce travels between the two cities on the stretch of the interstate. And it is also one of the only interstates to record over 300 crashes happening every year. So it is a very hard road to go down, and it's very hard for commerce to go down when crashes are happening and congestion is happening with only 2 lanes happening or going in each direction. So widening the interstate from 2 to 3 lanes in both directions is going to help that commerce flow into our city and flow throughout Arizona. The last one I want to talk about is the Loop 202 widening project. A meeting was held a few days ago on June 8th by the Arizona Department of Transportation to help kind of talk about and discuss their project, which is in the final design stages. The project is currently scheduled to start in 2024, and it is part of the Maricopa Association of Governments Regional Transportation Plan. The project is looking to expand the Loop 202 between Loop 101 and Val Vista near the town of Gilbert and the city of Chandler area. The project will help widen bridges and interchange ramps and includes plans to build sound barriers, among a lot of other infrastructure improvements. And will help also alleviate traffic flow to and from the Chandler area to thousands of daily commuters working here in our city. Maricopa is one of the nation's fastest growing counties, and our infrastructure needs to reflect that growth to continue the fast influx of workers and commerce. Our final speaker today is Ashley Cisneros. Ashley is a government relations policy and programs manager here at Chandler Chamber of Commerce. So please help me welcome Ashley.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. As Sebastian mentioned, my name is Ashley Cisneros. You might recognize the name from the 5 emails you probably received yesterday. Thank you for being here. Hopefully the individuals on Zoom haven't got the right link. So I just want to talk about, I know there's been a lot of talk about bills. Bowie touched on a lot of, Senator Bowie touched on a lot of them. So I don't want to go too much into all of it, the weeds, but what I do want to touch on is the advocacy that we do here on behalf of our business members down at the legislature, really the state, the federal and local level. And if you're not a business member, I have a nice gentleman here that you can talk to, just a plug there. But so this session we weighed in, there's 45 bills currently, and we're still watching and listening to things that are going on with the budget and everything that's happening. Senator Bowie touched on it. Arizona is a growing area. So we really need good legislation that is going to support the growth. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about here. Arizona really is the hotspot of the country right now. So these are the supported bills. Snap an image if you want to see that and look up to see what we're supporting, and I'll touch on a few of them. Now these right here are the few bills that have signed into law that we have supported. Now, the first bill, really, I talked about our legislators needing common sense legislation to help with the growth in our area. So Senator Bowie touched on this Senate Bill 1093, sponsored by JD Mesner. So it will reduce the commercial property assessment ratio from 16 to 15%. So it eases real estate costs. So that can help with our, the growth and economic development in our area. The next bill that budget, and I don't want to go into too much. Obviously, you heard from the subject matter expert here, but I want to talk about just what we want to look for with our government and as they work through budget. So the role of our state government, so keep tax floors, and this is from the executive summary of the budgets. But keep taxes straightforward and low, eliminate government red tape and unnecessary regulations, and adhere to fiscal discipline that keeps the cost of state government in a sustainable position. So the budget focus is education, public safety, natural resources, and infrastructure. Please, if you ever have any questions or want to sit down and talk about what's happening in our government, I'll come see me, grab my card, let's sit down with Terri and let's have that conversation on all the work we're doing as well as our legislature. So the next project I want to talk about, we have our sponsor here, Salt River Project. This is the SRP Coolidge expansion project. So I talked about the growing area and the need to really keep up with that. So this is a huge project to help support that growth in our area. So SRP, they're working to meet the growing demand for electricity and water. SRP has planned and is committed to carbon reduction. So the expansion of the Coolidge plant would help meet the near-term capacity and it would add renewable energy to the grid. Unfortunately, at this time, this project has been stalled with the Arizona Corporation Commission, but Chandler Chamber continues to support our partners to ensure that they have what they need as we move forward with this. So the Chandler Chamber does support this initiative. Now, the next bill, and it kind of ties into this, so I believe it's utilities reliability. So this bill in particular, it offers consumer protections. So just to mention some of the protections that are offered under that, so that it created an ombudsman's office to investigate consumer complaints. There's rules to protect against deceptive, unfair, and abusive practices. And it helped protect consumer information. So in just a couple other provisions of the legislation, so it allows electric cooperatives to collaborate with other entities in acquiring and disposing of electricity. And it repealed rules that allowed electric service providers to access infrastructure of public service operations. So not to get too technical in all of this. So Prop 400, I want to talk about this project. We had another public policy series, I think, back in April it was. So this is, so it's a 1/2 cent sales tax. It's not an increase. And please jump in if I misspeak on anything. But it's a continuation and will not increase taxes. I just want to throw that point out there, but it is a voter approved initiative. And it's a continuation, I mentioned that, of local funding. And voters have supported this initiative for the last 40 years. So this is something that you might see some of the projects that may have impacted you are like the loops 101 and 202. Those are a couple of projects that have been funded by this historic legislation.
And this is now also tied in with the budget, unfortunately or fortunately. And I do want to, Mayor Harkey has been leading, he has been the head of this transportation committee and helping to make sure that the East Valley also gets their fair share of monies as we go forward, so that all those monies aren't directed towards other parts of the valley. Not that those aren't important as well, but we put a lot of effort into this and we are also continuing to grow it. So this is a really, really hot button for not only our city, but as we continue to grow and move forward.
So this is city level, so Prop 470, some of the work we did was we sent a letter of support to the city for the Prop 470. So what this does is it allows Chandler City Council and residents to make budget decisions based on the needs of the community. It allows the city to spend generated revenue. It is a voter approved authority and it does not raise taxes. So I wanted to share on this. So yes, the Chandler Chamber has supported it. Vote yes, it will be on your ballot on August 2nd. So there are old rules that were in place that were set down at the state legislature that like 40 years ago that sets budget requirements for the city. And so this allows them to make better decisions on the budget and be able to spend the funding.
And the Chandler Chamber is all about local control, and this is absolutely the epitome of local control.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you. So, and I want to talk a little bit about federal stuff that we're doing and over the past few months. Now, I talked a lot about bills that we have supported. So there are there's things that we have opposed on behalf of our business members. So there's the rail sign-on letter that we have opposed. What this bill would have done was mandate competitors to have the option of using private infrastructure. And so we looked at it as a form of government overreach in forcing, can you imagine someone having your business and the government comes in and says, hey, this person needs to use your stuff and what say do you have, right? So we did oppose that sent an opposition letter. There's production, so there's for Semiconductor Chips for America Act, and the White House, there was a White House committee for the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. So I did have the opportunity to sit in on a meeting with White House officials who are pushing for U.S. chip manufacturing. So these two bills kind of tie together. They're trying to push for funding as well as STEM education funding for U.S. chip manufacturing to make us more competitive. We've seen all the disruptions in the supply chain, and so we want to make sure we have what we need, right? So those are two pieces that we've supported. And then there's, I think the last few, so the opposition, so there's two bills right now, antitrust bills that are, you might have seen the ads that are happening. So these bills will favor competitors and allow the use, similar to the rail, what I mentioned, it will allow competitors to use infrastructure, software, things like that. So we did oppose that. And then opposition to the Joy Silk Forced Union. So that forced union, it would allow employees to unionize. If there were 51% that they gathered signatures, it would force the employer into a union. And usually there's a hearing that would happen and it would remove that. So we did weigh in to oppose that. And the Supreme Court actually, I believe I don't know how long ago, but they did determine that the Joy Silk was unconstitutional. So that's why we jumped in to oppose that. And then the final support letter that we wrote, it was to Secretary Buttigieg, and that's the mega grant. Sebastian had talked to earlier the 400 million that Governor Ducey had put towards transportation. So we signed it. So this was basically a grant that the Department of Transportation is trying to get. And we had to do match funding. So we were able to build a case with the state. And I don't believe we've received a response yet on what that grant looked like. But so we were able to, our state was able to provide the match funding to apply for this mega grant. All right, so I want to put this plug in here. You may have grabbed a flyer when you walked in. So there are How We Stand document. It's on our website. You can see the sessions here. So we have an annual legislative agenda where we talk about, well, it puts all of our policy positions on everything we take a stance on. So if you want to provide your input and helping us develop that document, these are the roundtables. You can register on the website. You can attend either in person or virtually. And I think that's it. Yeah, so thank you for being here today. Appreciate all your support. Terry will field some questions and close for
Actually,
today.
questions? Anybody have questions? Yes.
I'm kind of curious where the CHIPS bill is at. They talk about it a lot. Like,
The CHIPS
where are the
bill-
holdups on that?
The CHIPS bill has taken on many different names,
Yeah.
changing the name as well. It's still stalled. We're getting there, we're making some headway, but again, I think partisan politics are jumping in
Yeah.
and taking a look at that. And when we approach things here at the chamber, we're all about business growth, because if those businesses are growing and continuing to grow and help revitalize and keeping our cities and communities approach viable, that's good business. Everything else, all the services, the health and human services, all those ancillary things, all benefit from that. So we got to keep our business communities strong. We have met with our federal delegation on individually on the CHIPS Acts and many of those others. I asked Ashley to put all of that in there because granted, we had a legislative update, but so many things that the legislature is dealing with now is also coming down from the federal government. So you've got all this overreach, and then even down to the city level, city with ARPA dollars and how they can spend some things. That is all from the top down. And you can't just talk about one thing, especially education. You can't talk about education without talking about the whole ecosystem. So we're really trying to give you an overview on things that we're weighing in on, transportation, infrastructure, transparency. All of those things are really critically important. Ashley brought up how we stand. God bless you. We have won national awards on that document. And it's really important because it's our business community. It's not what Ashley and I have to say or the board. It's what our business community is telling us, and that's what's helping move it forward. And I know we've got the elected officials in the room. You use that as a guide because he knows if a bill, Senator Bowie knows that if there's a bill that comes in front of him and we're opposed to it, he's going to pick up the phone and call me.
I don't want to get in trouble with me.
Well, but we also talk about it. We agree to disagree because we haven't, but again, we're representing what our business community wants. And that's what makes the value of that, how we stand, so incredibly important. All right. Well, thank you. Other questions? I'm going to take, I know we've just got a few moments here. Are there particular hot topics within your business sector that you feel are going to be issues as we move forward or that are affecting you?
Inflation, we have bad inflation numbers that came out today, the market just crashed.
Yeah.
So something's got to be done.
Yeah, inflation is going to be a huge issue as we go.
Solve.
Yeah, we are going to need to tighten our belts and be cautious about things. That's a key component. Anything else? Think about it. Think about it and then get with Ashley so that we can help kind of address those. I know that we put in some of those that aren't necessarily legislative, like the Coolidge component and that. Again, as we continue to move forward, infrastructure, whether it's broadband, water, any of that, it's going to be critically important if we're going to keep continuing to move Arizona forward. All right. I just want to do another shout out to our sponsors here today and for their continued support, because again, we wouldn't be able to have these programs. Air Products, Salt River Project, Planet Startup, Chandler Regional Health, Dignity Health Medical Center, Intel, Catalyst Computer Technology, Southwest Gas, Edward Jones Investments, APS, Dragon Walk, and so forth. I do want to, let's see, I know that we have Council Member Ellis. Is she still online?
Mm-hmm.
Council Member, did you have anything additional that you wanted to add as an update from our elected?
Good morning, everyone. Not at this time. I heard that you mentioned the budget being passed last night, so which was a great win for us here in Chandler. And the fact that we have that bond, that bill that's coming also for us to be able to appropriate the monies in the right way. So I appreciate that, was mentioned by the policy input. So thank you, everyone. And last one though, I wanted to say thank you to Representative Bowie. He has always been the kindest man anytime I meet him. And I was very disappointed when I hear he was not going to run again. But at the same time, I think, you know, everybody has to make the decision that best for them. So I wish him the best in the new ways that he would like to continue. But I'm not going to be surprised if he's not going to come back doing something else.
You weren't as
Looking forward
disappointed as I was. Trust me, after I picked myself up and cried. Representative Pollock, thank you for being here. Do you want to talk about, you have a new office right here in Chandler?
Well, I do. It's a campaign office and we're at Price and Dobson where they intersect. So we're excited that we are building our team and sitting out there and talking to them.
I just also want to thank you for your work down there on education and continuing to keep Chandler in the forefront, and I appreciate that. So, all right. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you at the How We Stand. We will not be meeting for public policy during July because we're working on the How We Stand document. We will resume back in August here in this room, correct? Okay, thank you. All right, have a great day.